Joining me is Mohammad Rafiuddin, the program lead at CEEW. Vimlendu Jha, the environmentalist, is with you. And Devabhukti Shri Krishna is also with us. He's the engineering and public health researcher and founder at patientknowhow.com. Very happy to have you all back here on the program. Vimlendu, let me give you the first word. Like I said, I'm pleased at the fact that people in the country understand the issue so well, right? We understand it, they understand it so well, they understand the causes for it, they also understand whose responsibility is it. Has this surprised you at all?
In fact, if you look at some of the answers, there are two ways that you can look at the second question with regard to, should this be the top priority for policymakers? And the first answer, in fact, was around 80% said yes, they should be the top one. And the other answer, which is with regard to around 13.3%, it says, oh, well, no, not really, because they think that Delhi should not be the only priority. Because I'm looking at it in a very, very different way. For me, answer to this is actually almost around 95% people saying that yes, air pollution should be a priority. Yes, Delhi needs more attention, but perhaps the rest of the country also needs attention, and that's the rising awareness in the citizenry where they think and they start agreeing that it's not a Delhi-centric problem alone. In fact, very, very interestingly, like imagine the government again and again in the Supreme Court keeps saying and keeps telling us that they do not have data. And imagine our citizenry, and this is the sustained effort made by people like yourself and others, that citizens know that 40% of the pollution actually is from the vehicular sector, the mobility sector in that sense. And almost 30% of the pollution is actually construction and demolition and roadside dust and emissions. This is bang on if you look at IIT Kanpur and IIT Kharagpur report. So in all of this, and at the same time, also the first answer with regard to, who do you think is responsible? Indeed, as I keep saying it, that, we cannot have a private solution to a public problem. They all think that is the government's responsibility and a collective responsibility, failure of the past and also the failure of the future. Because if we continue like this, it's a collective responsibility or collective irresponsibility in that sense, be it of Aam Aadmi Party or the priority of perhaps the Congress government, although Congress government has been away for a long, long time, but the current and the future governments in that sense. So clearly, people understanding that this is important, people not faffing in that sense, people know the science, people are reading, and I think their lungs are doing better reading than the data points that the government is giving to us. So everyone is suffering. They don't have a choice but to ignore this. They are feeling it in their lungs. Their children, through their nebulizers and their inhalers, are actually complaining. And this is therefore not an academic conversation where a hypothetical answer needs to be given. This is extremely scientific, so bang on, both in terms of accountability, sources, also in terms of way forward, looking at, no, this is not us fixing this problem. It's you, the government, or the governments who will have to solve the problem. So therefore, a bang on analysis of mood of the nation. Actually, it's mood of the nation and not just mood of the Delhi.
Yeah, it is mood of the nation indeed. And I love what you said about, this just being such a massive takeaway to understand that people are basically saying to all those in power that don't fool us. We understand the issue. We understand what's causing this. We understand what it is leading to, and we also know who's going to fix it. The only problem here is when you say collective responsibility, is it nobody's responsibility or is it everybody's responsibility? That's where the problem really lies. And I wonder if there was a follow-up question to this to say, will you vote on the issue of pollution? Who do you blame? Then again, does it become collective responsibility and thus nobody's responsibility? That for me is the worrying part, but I'll come to that in just a minute. Let me bring in Rafiuddin as well. Rafiuddin, if you look at the first question, where the first thing that was asked in the mood of the nation was, do you think we, that is us as citizens, are doing enough to protect the environment? A whopping number of 60% say that they are. Now, this is their own analysis and own assessment of what we do, which has to be taken with a pinch of salt. But people feel that they're doing their bit. People are aware and they feel they are doing the most that they can on the issue of pollution. Is that a positive takeaway, or are we to, like I said, take it with a pinch of salt?
I would say, people generally, I would say, if you ask me, I would also say that I'm probably doing enough on the issue of
No,
air
you
pollution.
will.
So,
You know more than anybody else. So you will. I'm talking about Aam Janta. I'm talking about a middle class man who has 4 mouths to feed, 6 insurances to fill up for, wants the best out of their job, wants the best out of for their kids, and in middle of all of that, with some miracle, try and have a good, happy life.
No, I mean, for instance, there are a lot of things that people do, and but they don't realize that they're really contributing to the problem of air pollution. For instance, left with no choice, a person would actually prefer using their own vehicle to travel from one point in the city to the other, right? And assuming that's like a vehicle of a newer fuel standard, like a BS6 vehicle, you would probably think that, okay, you're driving the latest vehicle and you're probably not emitting as much as the others. But if you're still burning fossil fuels, you're still releasing the gases from your tailpipe, and you're still contributing to the problem of air pollution, although you're slightly better off compared to someone using an older vehicle. So this is just one example. And there are many such examples where people can choose to do much more than what they're doing right now. For instance, you could like gather with your friends on the rooftop and have a very harmless bonfire for one night, right? But burning that wood for maybe a couple of hours, it appears like a small problem to you. But imagine 10,000 people in the city doing the same thing, right?
Yeah.
It contributes to air pollution in a huge way. Biomass burning itself is 20% of air pollution's share in winter, for instance. So this is something that, I would say people generally tend to overestimate what they're doing for the environment. But the reality is there is always something more that citizens can do.
Yeah, something more. That actually nicely put. Let me bring in Deva Bhaktini on this one. Like I said, while it is heartening to see that people understand the truth about pollution, this collective responsibility leaves me in a bit of a soup, because I don't know who to go for, whose door to knock, and who will take the lead on this battle for toxic air, battle for clean air, actually. Who do you think leads that? When it's everybody's responsibility, it's nobody's responsibility, basically, right?
That's a very important question. And where is why is there an increased concentration of pollution in the air? And the answer to that is it was pointed to by the CAQM report that came out in response to the Supreme Court ruling. And they had identified the planetary boundary layer as a limiting factor that's basically trapping the pollutants. And so all the pollution that's produced in the whole city is not able to escape from vertically. And so this is a fundamentally important concept. And why is that happening? It's because normally the temperature of the atmosphere has to decrease as the height goes up in order for the pollutants to escape from the ground.
Inversion.
And this is what inversion. And so, well, the inversion happens when that's not so basically when the temperature is not falling as you grow in height, the temperature has to go lower and lower and lower in order for the air to rise. But the problem is when you have the temperature staying the same or not falling fast enough as you rise, it is trapping the pollutants. And one of the main reasons for that is the presence of black carbon. Black carbon is essentially black. It absorbs sunlight. It heats the atmosphere. And that is basically warming and trapping the pollutants. And so when you look from an airplane, what's happening in Delhi, you see this layer.
Yeah.
You just have to look at that. There's a lot of photos of those on the internet and everywhere. And so so they have identified that boundary layer as the problem. Now the question is, why is this happening? And there is a disproportionate effect from certain types of sources that produce black carbon, not just the particles. And one of the most important sources of that are vehicles, and within that is diesel vehicles. And so you think of it slightly differently, which is what is causing the optical effect to warm the atmosphere is a very different answer than what is producing the pollution. And so the real response, so if you want to assign responsibility, or it's not necessarily trying to assign blame, but it's assigning what is the physical cause of the trapping of the pollutants. It's coming. It's happening because the boundary layer is unable to the pollution is unable to escape, and the black carbon is heating the atmosphere, and that's coming from diesel vehicles. Diesel vehicles produce most of the black carbon, and this was studied in a paper by Dr. Vikas Singh
Got it.
who's
Interesting
now on
what you're saying. You're saying that if there is one department, so to say, that is to be looked at before anything else, it has to be transport. We've got to fix that before we fix everything else. That's where you're saying the fixing of responsibility will actually start. That's interesting. But I have another question for all three of you, and I'll start with Vimlendu on that one. We are just a day away from the budget, right? Now, there are growing demands that there should be a clean air budget allocation that is done at the central level to ensure that we clean up India's air. That we do what Beijing, London, Mexico, and all these countries have managed to do 10 years ago, and we do that. Is that the hope, that a central budget allocation to clean up India's air, that is what it will take to ensure that it happens ground up? Because like we said, pollution doesn't have boundaries by state or countries.
So absolutely, Sonal. So we're not talking about allocation of resources. We're talking about proportionate allocation of resources, adequate allocation of resources, not just lip service allocation of resources. Because a couple of years ago, almost 6 years ago, we did allocate around 19,000 crores for entire country for 6 years, which comes to around 300 crores a year, which comes to around 20 crores a city. But we will not be able to solve this problem of 800 AQI for almost 200 days, or poor air quality of Delhi alone for almost 250 to 300 days in that sense, and for the entire country by this minuscule amount, as what Geeta Gopinath was also talking about, and what various studies have talked about, and what I keep saying all the time is that cost of inaction actually is higher than cost of action, in the sense that, you know, if you have studies that keep telling you about 6% to 9.6% loss to GDP just by air pollution or the damage, and we're not even talking about lives lost or morbidity, and therefore, and if you translate that into actual dollar value or rupee value, it comes to somewhere around 30 lakh crores that we're losing each year because of air pollution. And therefore, it's only intelligent enough, wise enough, apt enough and fiscal enough for the government to really put that money on the table. And money by money, we're not looking at a small amount, we're looking at proportionate amount. And the fact that, imagine, it's not just about shame. We talk about death, we talk about shame, we talk about bad name, we talk about loss of perception, we are talking about escaping, people actually fleeing Delhi, as we've had CEOs not take appointments in Delhi NCR, a lot of people not taking, a lot of diplomats don't want to come here because this is almost like a war kind of a posting in that sense. And therefore, high time that the central government, rather than respective state governments, it's very important that this is a national problem, and therefore it needs national attention, and it needs national budget. If we have priorities to put 2.5 lakh crores each year on transport sector, and indeed, and we're not saying that, you know, what is important, whether defense is important, whether midday meal is important, or this is important or not. But we're saying that breathing is as important, or perhaps if not more important. And this number of 17 lakh deaths each year is an alarming number. As in, you know, imagine 18% of Indians dying each year just because of air, which means that 1 in 5 people dying every year. And that visual, imagination, that visual of a stunted lung or a black lung of a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old is really, really dangerous. That's not the image, or that's not the health of a country that the third largest economy should be building. So indeed, I'm of the opinion that yes, it is possible for India to grow and growth sustainability with good sized lung and good sized heart and good sized breath as well. We do not, we can actually, perhaps, maybe we will have to delay it by say 6 months or a year. But again, we will have to have that political will at the central level and have the adequate ground up administrative structure, governance structure, because I do not believe anything that CAQM does. We don't need advisory bodies like CAQM. And imagine, Sonal, it's rained 3 days and still look at the AQI of 300 to 400. So next time the government tells you about this artificial rain and cloud seeding, tell them, hey, listen, it rained last time and it was 400 when it was God-gifted rain, and you're spending 40 crores to bring in this artificial chemical induced and with huge side effect on soil and water rain in that sense. So scientific temperament, actual political will, front foot batting on this, and something that should happen from the Prime Minister's office and not from the Ministry of Environment's office, because
Yes,
this is
and
not an
I
environment problem.
think,
This is
yes.
transport, this is agriculture, this is finance, this is health, this is energy, this is all the sectors together. Take little bit from everyone, both in terms of money and
This is
political
India
will.
problem. Let's just call it as it is. This is an India problem. This is an Indians problem. And this is a priority that the government needs to pick up. But let me also call it out for what it is. If you don't fix health of the nation, you don't fix anything else. Economy, employment, everything falls flat. Any schemes will fall flat if you're not fixing the health of the nation. And the fact remains that we have abysmally low spends on health as well. Compared to our neighboring countries, even compared to China, we are just half of what a country of our size should be spending per GDP percentage-wise on health. We are abysmally low, and that numbers need a revision. But this is a separate problem that we're looking at. I have last 2 minutes, so I want to quickly give last 2 words to Rafiuddin and Devabhaktini as well. Rafiuddin, to you first. I've spoken about the corpus for cleaning up India's air. What's clearly required is not just allocation of that money, but a centralized body with power and teeth to actually make it happen.
I second Lindu's thoughts about proportionate allocation, but I also think that not everything can be center-driven. We'll need to figure out a governance structure, the administrative structure, which would because air pollution is not like a straitjacket problem where you have the sectors predefined for all the regions across the country, right? So some states, some cities may be facing a whole different problem. I mean, the sectors may be entirely different compared to what the other cities have. So maybe they'll have to figure out solutions bottom up. So they'll have to figure out localized solutions. So I'm not sure about whether a centralized body would be able to do it, but definitely a mission-driven approach, which flows from the center, would definitely help. And looking at what the economic survey has said yesterday, and there are some very interesting thoughts on solving the transportation problem, the congestion problem, and puts a lot of focus on urbanization and urban living standards and the quality of life across Indian cities. Yeah. So I, for one, I'm hopeful that the budget will have something on air pollution. We'll have to wait a couple of days to see what comes of it.
Let's see. I'm hopeful as well. The mood of the nation is hopeful as well. Clearly, we're all waiting out to see what happens. Devabhaktini, very quickly, last 30 seconds on what you would wish for the finance minister to actually put out in the budget now.
I think I would wish that the diesel emissions be controlled, and so the particulate matter from the diesel vehicles, because they produce most of the black carbon from the transport sector. And this is like an urgent priority, that if you just wave my magic wand, get rid of the black carbon from diesel vehicles, I think there'll be a huge impact on the Delhi NCR region.
All right. On that note, I'm going to thank all of you for joining me today. And let's see, all our eyes are on the budget. We'll be watching very keenly, not just for allocations that happen on economy, but allocations that happen on health here as well. Thank you all so much for joining us.